I walked into my house still smelling like fish guts, my lower back screaming. That damn back of mine always acts up after a few hours on the lake. I'd planned on staying out there longer, maybe until dusk, but something felt off. Could have been the wind shifting or the way the clouds hung low. I don't know. I just packed up my rod, tossed the fish in a bag, and drove home. No big reason. Just felt done. Our place wasn't anything fancy. 2-story house on a quiet street in Ohio, a little yard out front with a tired-looking bird bath. I'd spent 30 years living with the same woman inside those walls. 30 years of birthdays, arguments, making up, raising 2 boys. We got married young, too young, some folks said, but we stuck it out because that's what people did back then. You stay, you push through. And for most of my life, I thought we did all right. I was never a big talker about my feelings. The kids always teased me for that. Dad's a rock, they'd say. I guess that's me. A quiet guy who works, fishes on weekends, tries to handle his own problems. I'm not big on hugging or crying either. Doesn't mean I didn't love them. I just showed it in smaller ways, fixing a clogged drain at 2 a.m. or driving them across town when their car wouldn't start. That was me being a dad. The older boy, we called him Junior, he was always into science stuff. Got that from my wife, I think. She was bright in school, used to talk about going to college before we had kids. My younger boy was the adventurous one, loved skateboarding and bikes. He'd come home with scraped knees, torn jeans. I'd scold him, tell him to be careful, but inside I was proud he wasn't afraid of falling. My cousin Bill, well, he was around a lot. We grew up together, spent summers chasing frogs and fishing in the same creeks. Bill was always the loud one, telling dirty jokes at cookouts, popping beers open with his teeth, wearing these cheap cologne scents that stuck to your skin if you got too close. But he was family. He'd come over on holidays, sometimes stay for a few days if he had a fight with his girlfriend or needed a place to crash. I never thought much of it. Family's family. Anyway, that day, I wasn't expecting anything. I just wanted to get inside, maybe fry up a fillet or 2, then crash on the couch. My back was killing me, and I wanted to rest before the kids got home from wherever they'd gone. I stepped through the front door, dropped my fishing gear near the entry, and noticed the house was real quiet. Usually, I'd hear the TV or the hum of the dishwasher. But it was dead silent. I remember shrugging it off. I walked straight to the kitchen to drop off the bag of fish. But as I passed the hallway leading to the bedroom, I heard something. A low sound at first, like a groan or a muffled scream. I paused. Thought maybe the wife was hurt, so I stepped closer. That's when I heard the moaning. Real distinct. Hot, heavy breathing, and a woman's voice that sure as hell sounded like she was in the middle of something. I froze. My first stupid thought was, maybe she's watching some adult movie with the volume up. But that was ridiculous. She never did that, not that I'd known of. So I took another step, real cautious, like I was sneaking up on a burglar. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough that I could see shapes moving. I nudged it wider. And I saw them, Bill on top of her, naked as sin, moving in a way I'd never seen in my own bedroom. The bed squeaked. She let out these moans, high-pitched, desperate. Not the kind of noise I ever heard from her in all our years. He didn't even glance my way. It's like he was possessed. Her hands grabbed at him, her nails digging into his back. My heart hammered so hard I thought my chest would explode. I stood there maybe 5 seconds, fish bag still in my hand. It stank of fresh catch, and all I could think was how unreal it felt. 30 years married, 2 kids, a life built brick by brick, and there she was, with my own cousin, panting like an animal. I didn't make a sound. Didn't cough or shout or fling the door open. I just stared. Then I stepped forward and tossed the bag of fish onto the bed. The plastic smacked against the sheets, and Bill jumped, nearly fell off her. She let out this startled cry, covering herself with the blanket. Then I turned around and walked out. No yelling, no cussing. Just walked down the hallway to the kitchen. My hands were shaking, and I felt a cold sweat trickling down my spine. But my face, numb. I set the coffee maker on. I needed something normal. Something routine. So I scooped coffee grounds, poured water, and hit the switch. The machine gurgled, and the smell of coffee filled the air. I leaned on the counter, stared at the floor. I'm not sure how much time passed, maybe a minute or two, before I heard their footsteps. When I looked up, they stood in the kitchen doorway. She had thrown on a robe, hair messy, face flushed. Her eyes stuck to the tiles, couldn't look me in the face. Bill stood there in my sweatpants, mine, for God's sake, like he was clueless. His mouth opened and closed, no words forming. I could see sweat on his forehead. I sank into a chair. My mind was spinning with 1,000 thoughts, but my body felt heavy. She started to say something. Honey, or, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact words. I just waved a hand at her to shut up. Then I looked at Bill. Take those pants off, I told him. My voice was quiet, but I felt the anger clawing up my throat. He just stammered, Brother, I'm sorry. And I lunged for the first thing I could grab, the old wooden stool we kept by the counter. Swung it. Not some dramatic movie swing, but a fast, desperate strike. The stool cracked against the back of his skull. He went down without a sound, like a sack of flour hitting the ground. She screamed. He lay there, blood dripping from a cut on his scalp. His eyes rolled back. I didn't know if he was dead or alive, but I felt no rush to check. My ears rang with this dull roar, like a train passing. My wife was shrieking, kneeling by him, calling his name. I just stepped away and grabbed a towel, pressed it to his head to stop the bleeding. Not because I cared, but because I wasn't looking to kill him. Just needed him to know he was done in my house. He moaned after a minute, tried to get up. His hands fumbled on the floor. My wife kept sobbing. Oh God, over and over. I told her. Stop. Both of you. I don't want the police. I just want you out. She looked at me, tears streaming, and said something like, We need a doctor. But I just stared. Then go call one, I said. But not from here. I told Bill. You're done. I never want to see your face again. You call me brother one more time, I'll finish this job. He kept his head down, blood running down his cheek. I pointed to the door. Then I looked at her. Get the kids, I said. Take them. Go. That was it. The only words I managed. No big speech, no demands for an explanation. There was nothing to explain. 30 years of trust, gone in a single moment. My back still hurt like hell, but I hardly noticed it. I walked out to the living room, pulled open the curtains, and stood there staring at the front yard. It was a nice day. Sunny even. Birds in the tree, wind rustling the leaves. Everything looked normal, like the world hadn't just shattered in my kitchen. She tried to talk to me again, voice shaky. Please let me call an ambulance. He's hurt. Her words, muffled like I was underwater. I didn't respond. I just kept my eyes on that tree outside. I heard them move around the house. Her footsteps hurried. Bill stumbling, maybe leaning against the wall for support. Doors opening and closing. I figured she was calling someone to come get him. I didn't care. He could limp out on his own for all I was concerned. But I didn't want him bleeding out on my floor either. So I stayed still and let them handle it. I guess 10 or 15 minutes passed. Then the kids came home, both of them. I heard their voices, quiet and tense. She must have told them something, because they didn't come to me. They just hovered near the front door. I pictured them in my mind, the older one holding his backpack, the younger one in a hoodie, looking from their mom to Bill, not saying a damn thing. And Bill probably standing there with a towel on his head, half dazed. She told them to get in the car. They obeyed. No argument. That part still stings. They just left with her. Didn't come ask me what happened. Didn't question anything. That was the moment I realized how alone I really was, even before the DNA stuff. Like maybe deep down, they'd suspected something all along. Or maybe they were just scared. Hard to say. When the door finally shut behind them, I sank onto the couch. The house was still. My coffee in the kitchen had gone cold. The smell of fish lingered, mixing with the coppery scent of Bill's blood. I sat there a long time, hands trembling, mind blank. Outside, I heard a car engine start and fade away. Gone. Just like that. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just sat there silent, feeling like the ground under me had split open. 30 years. Gone in a single afternoon. I could still picture Bill pumping away on her like some stray dog, the sounds she made so raw and desperate. I felt a wave of nausea and had to close my eyes. After a while, I got up and went to the kitchen. The stool was on the floor, one leg cracked from the impact. There was a small puddle of blood on the tiles. I sighed, grabbed a rag, and started wiping it up. That's what I do, I clean up messes. I fix problems. Even this. I guess part of me already knew there was no cleaning up the real mess. That was going to stay with me forever. I finished wiping, washed my hands, then looked at the coffee pot. Still half full. So I poured a mug and drank it cold, standing by the sink. The silence felt heavy, pressing on my eardrums. I sipped that coffee and let the bitterness spread on my tongue. The fish was still in the bedroom, on the bed. I should have thrown it out, but I didn't have the energy. I just stood there in the hallway, staring at the door where I'd caught them. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment you never forget. A part of me wanted to burn the sheets, the mattress, the whole damn house. But I just turned off the lights and went back to the couch, laid down, and stared at the ceiling. My back throbbed, but I didn't care. I closed my eyes and tried to block out the images in my head. Sleep wouldn't come. I just lay there for hours, replaying it, Bill's sweat dripping onto my wife's skin, her voice moaning in a way I never heard in all our years, the wet slap of flesh on flesh. And then that stool crashing onto his skull. Over and over, like a loop. That's how the night went, me, on the couch, wide awake, listening to my own heartbeat in an empty house. Maybe I dozed off for an hour or two, but if I did, I don't remember dreaming. By morning, the coffee mug was still on the table, and my back felt worse than ever. I tried to stand, nearly toppled over. My knee wobbled. Felt like an old man. An old man who'd lost everything in a single day. I didn't bother showering. Didn't check my phone. Had no desire to see any messages or calls. I just sat down again, letting the hours pass. At some point I realized I was hungry, so I opened the fridge and saw a carton of eggs. I took them out, cracked a few in a pan, and stood there watching them bubble. No salt, no pepper. I ate them plain. Couldn't taste a thing. When I was done, I washed the plate, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. And then I waited. For what, I don't know. Maybe for the reality to sink in. Maybe for her to come back and say something. But she didn't. There was just me, the quiet, and a memory of my life that suddenly felt like a lie. The next day, I woke up stiff on that couch, a kink in my neck. My phone buzzed a couple times, but I ignored it. After maybe an hour of staring at the ceiling, I forced myself to get up. The house felt colder, emptier, like somebody had sucked the life out of it. I glanced around at all the pictures on the walls, the kids at Disney World, family holidays, me and my wife at some cousin's wedding. We looked happy in those photos. Or at least comfortable. And Bill was in some of them too, grinning like a fool. The memories churned my gut. I tried turning on the TV to distract myself, but the noise felt wrong. So I turned it off and walked around the house, touching furniture, opening closets, not sure what I was looking for. Maybe some clue that would make sense of it all. Instead, I found a bunch of her clothes still in the drawers. Her nightgown hanging behind the bathroom door. Bathroom counter cluttered with her lotions and makeup. They'd left in a hurry. I went back to the kitchen where it all happened. The stool was leaning against the wall. The crack along one leg looked like a jagged scar. On the floor, I could still see a faint stain where Bill's blood had soaked into the grout. I felt a mix of rage and sadness I couldn't name. I remembered him calling me brother. For years, we'd fished together, watched ball games, share beers at family picnics. I'd always put up with his crap because he was blood. Now the smell of him, the cheap cologne, the sweat, felt like it was burned into my nostrils. As for my wife, I didn't know what to feel. Hate? Betrayal? I was mostly numb. Like my mind hadn't caught up with reality. I could still see the image, Bill's body moving on top of her, her face twisted in pleasure, that moaning. It made me sick to my stomach. Around noon, I finally checked my phone. Missed calls from her. A couple text messages from the kids. Dad, are you okay? And, we're at Grandma's. I just stared at the screen. Didn't reply. Didn't want to. I knew I'd have to talk to them eventually, but not then. I was too raw, too angry. I set the phone down and went outside. The sunshine hit me, and for a moment, I felt dizzy. The yard looked exactly the same as yesterday, birdbath, the old mailbox leaning to one side. A neighbor waved from across the street, and I raised a hand back automatically. He had no idea what had happened. Nobody did. It was a normal day in a normal neighborhood, and inside my house, my life was falling apart. I went to the garage, pulled out a folding chair, and sat there among boxes of Christmas ornaments and rusty tools. Flies buzzed around, landing on the stale pool of water near the drain. I sat and tried to think. Should I call a lawyer? Should I pack her things? Should I track Bill down and finish what I started? But none of it felt real. Instead, I just sat there, drifting in and out of my own head. Later, I got up and went back inside. I was restless, pacing around. I realized I hadn't eaten anything except those eggs the day before. My stomach growled, but the idea of putting food in my mouth turned my gut. I poured another cup of coffee instead, microwaved it until it boiled over, sipped it while staring at the blank TV screen. Evening came, and still no sign of her, no sign of the kids. I got one more text from her. We're staying at my mother's place for now. Let's talk when you're ready. I almost threw the phone across the room. Talk? About what? I turned it off, tossed it onto the couch. I felt this wave of exhaustion hit me, but I couldn't rest. My mind replayed the scene over and over. It was close to midnight when I finally decided to do something with her clothes. I thought about dumping them on the front lawn, like you see in movies, but that felt cliché. I wanted something that cut deeper, that would make me remember this moment in a way that felt personal. I grabbed a black garbage bag, went into the bedroom, and started stuffing her clothes inside. One by one. Her shirts, her underwear, her dresses. Nothing dramatic. Just methodical. At one point I held up the dress she wore to our 25th anniversary. I remembered how pretty she looked that night, how we danced in the living room with the lights off because we couldn't afford a big party. I clutched that dress, feeling a rush of grief. Then I shoved it in the bag. Once I had everything, I tied the bag up tight and took it out to the backyard. We had a small fire pit there we hardly used. I tossed the bag in the pit, grabbed some lighter fluid from the garage, and soaked it. Then I lit it. The flames jumped fast, devouring the plastic and fabric. The smell was awful, burning synthetic fibers, acrid smoke curling into the sky. My eyes stung. I stood there watching until there was nothing left but smoldering ash and twisted lumps of melted plastic. It was stupid and dramatic, but it was mine. A weird ritual to mark the death of something. The next morning, I woke up with an ashy taste in my mouth. My throat felt raw, probably from inhaling that smoke. I checked my phone again, no new messages. I guess she gave up trying to reach me. Maybe she was waiting for me to calm down. Or maybe she was ashamed. Didn't matter. My arms felt heavy, like I'd been hauling bricks. I forced myself to shower, scrubbed off the smell of smoke and stale sweat, and put on fresh clothes. After that, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the leftover coffee mug until my mind started drifting. Memories came flooding in, The day our first son was born, how I held him and felt this swell of pride. The time Bill helped me fix our fence after a storm, joking around about how we were real men, doing the dirty work. The night my wife said she loved me more than anything, and I believed her. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else now. By afternoon, I realized I had to do something practical. Our finances, the house payments, all the mundane stuff that doesn't stop for tragedy. So I opened the laptop, scanned through bank statements, tried to see if she drained any accounts. Everything looked normal. Mortgage was due in a couple weeks. Great. Another thing to deal with. I glanced at the wedding photo on the desk. Us, young and smiling in front of some cheap wedding arch. My wife's eyes shining. Bill was actually my best man that day. I remember him winking at me before the ceremony, saying, "You sure about this, buddy?" We laughed then. How messed up is that? I closed the laptop, not wanting to think about money. Or them. The silence in the house was suffocating. I used to crave quiet, especially after a long day at work. Now it felt like it was pressing in on me, reminding me I was alone. I considered calling one of my buddies, but what would I say? "Hey, guess what I found yesterday?" The thought made me clench my jaw. This was too raw, too personal to share with anyone right now. Toward evening, I grabbed my keys and got in my truck. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I ended up driving around town, passing by the kids' school, the diner where my wife and I ate pie on Fridays, the hardware store where I used to buy random stuff for weekend projects. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of a life that didn't feel like mine anymore. I drove until the gas light came on. Found a station, filled up, and got a black coffee from the mini-mart. The clerk asked how my day was going. I just shrugged. Fine. Drove some more, ended up by a small park near the river. The sun was low, turning the water orange. I parked, sipped my coffee, watched a couple of teenagers skip stones. In that moment, I felt about 100 years old. I thought about Bill. Maybe he was lying in a hospital bed somewhere, or maybe he was holed up in a motel, nursing his busted head. I didn't care. Let him rot. The idea of calling the cops had crossed my mind, but what would I say? I caught him screwing my wife, so I bashed his skull. They'd arrest me. Nah, I decided. If Bill wanted to press charges, he could. But I doubted he would. We'd known each other too long. Plus, he'd have to explain why he was in my bed with my wife. Coward. Eventually, I started the truck again, drove back home. The house was dark, and I left it that way. Just flicked on a single lamp in the living room, enough to see by. I stood there, taking in the emptiness. The air felt stale, like it hadn't been breathed in days. A wave of anger hit me again, toward her, toward Bill, toward everything. I wanted to punch a hole in the wall, throw the TV off the stand, break every dish in the cupboard. But I didn't. I just sank onto the couch. That night I barely slept. Kept replaying the look on her face when I threw that bag of fish onto the bed, the way Bill didn't even turn around at first. Like I didn't exist. I remember the exact second when I realized the marriage was over, and it wasn't during the act. It was after. In the kitchen, when she couldn't even look at me. That's when I knew. Morning came, and I woke with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt to open my mouth. My phone showed a single new text from the older boy. "Dad, I love you. Please talk to me." I stared at it for a long while, then typed back. "I love you too. Not now." Press send. Powered off the phone again. I decided to leave the house for a bit. Maybe get groceries, do something normal. But the second I walked down the hallway, I caught sight of the bedroom door, still half open, like it was mocking me. That memory flared up again, and I clenched my fists. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to give. I figured I should see them, my wife, my kids, face to face. Talk it out, or at least say what needed to be said. Let them know how this was going to go. So I drove over to her mother's place, a rundown little ranch house about 15 minutes away. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt my stomach twist. This was the house where we'd spent Thanksgivings, Easters, birthdays. Now it felt hostile. I knocked on the door. My wife's mom answered. She gave me a look like I was the devil himself, but she stepped aside. Inside, the boys were in the living room, staring at their phones. They looked up when I walked in, eyes wide. My wife appeared from the hallway, hair pulled back, wearing sweats, no makeup. She looked older, tired. She hesitated a moment, then said, "We need to talk," and gestured for me to follow her into the kitchen. The boys stayed put, like they were glued to the couch. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter. She stood by the sink. We didn't hug, didn't do anything that two married people might do. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally she said, "Is Bill, did you?" I cut her off. "He's still breathing, if that's what you're asking. I don't know where he is. I don't care." She nodded, eyes flicking down. "He's staying at a motel. He said he lost some vision in his left eye. You really did a number on him." "Good," I said. My voice came out low, hoarse. "You want to call the cops on me for assault? Go ahead." She shook her head, tears gathering in her eyes. "No, of course not. I just—" She stopped, took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, bitter. "How long has it been going on?" She swallowed hard. "A year. Maybe more." A pause. "It just happened. I never meant—" I held up my hand. "Don't. I don't want details. You did what you did. Now we deal with it." She looked like she wanted to crumple. I remembered a time I would have comforted her, put my arms around her. Now my hands stayed at my sides. "Are you," she began, voice trembling, "are you going to divorce me?" I stared at her, letting the question hang in the air. "I told you," I said finally. "Take the kids. You can do what you want. I'm not stopping you. But we're done. You and me. That's it." The tears spilled over then. She sank into a chair, buried her face in her hands. "I never wanted this," she said through sobs. I just stood there, arms crossed. I felt some flicker of pity, maybe even regret. But it was swallowed by anger and betrayal. I couldn't find words to soften the blow. My mother-in-law hovered in the hallway, watching, her eyes darting between us. She was no fan of mine from day one, but she tolerated me. Now she looked half scared. Maybe she thought I'd start swinging again. But I didn't. I felt tired. Drained. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Maybe you should both calm down, talk this out." I ignored her, fixed my gaze on my wife. "You can keep the car," I said. "I'll figure something out. I'll stay at the house for now, but I'm not sure I want it. You can come get your things, but call first." I didn't wait for an answer. Just turned and walked to the living room, where the boys were. They looked at me with big eyes. The older one tried to speak, but his voice caught. The younger one shifted uncomfortably. I stared at them, and for a second my chest hurt. I was their dad. I loved them. But the betrayal was fresh in my mind. I struggled with what to say. After a moment, I just muttered, "You guys okay?" They nodded. The older one said, "Dad, we're sorry." That's it. I wasn't sure what they were sorry for, having a cheating mom, or not stepping in when it all went down. Maybe just sorry the world turned upside down. I forced myself to nod, then I left. When I got back home, I slumped on the couch. The anger still burned, but now it was mixed with sadness. I dozed off, and a few hours later, I woke to the sound of the front door opening. My wife and the boys were there, collecting clothes, electronics, things they needed. She tried to speak to me again, but I just stared at the wall. I heard them moving around, the boys speaking in hushed tones. I let them take whatever. I had no fight left in me. A couple days later, I was alone in the house. I got a call from my older kid's teacher. Something about a project in biology class, a DNA family tree. She wanted to confirm I was on board with my son referencing our ancestry or something. I barely listened, just said, "Sure, fine." Hung up. My mind was elsewhere. Weeks passed. The house got dustier, quieter. My phone rang less and less, except for telemarketers. My nights were restless, my days empty. I tried to fish once or twice, but my back was acting up, and I couldn't focus. All I could see were images of Bill and her. I tried to block it out, but it crawled in anyway. Then one afternoon, the older boy texted me, "Dad, can we talk? I have something important." I didn't respond immediately, but eventually I said, "Sure. Come by." He showed up alone, looked nervous. We sat in the living room, me in the recliner, him on the couch. He fiddled with his phone for a while. I waited. Finally, he said, "Dad, we had this project in biology, about family DNA. I had to look at genetic markers, compare them with parents. And I don't know how to say this." I felt my stomach clench. "Spit it out," I said. He swallowed, looked at me with tears in his eyes. "It doesn't match, Dad. Your DNA doesn't match mine. Or my brother's." His voice cracked. "We're not, biologically, we're not your sons." My head swam. I opened my mouth, but no words came. He went on, voice shaky. "It lines up with Bill's. There's this detail in the markers, it's not 100%, but it's really close." He paused, eyes flooding. I didn't believe it at first. But then I confronted Mom, and she confirmed. "Bill's our father. Both of us." My heart pounded so loud I thought I'd go deaf. I stared at him, barely breathing. Images flashed, me teaching him to ride a bike, me congratulating him on his first A in math, me standing in the crowd at his football games, cheering like an idiot. This was my son. Yet he wasn't. And it wasn't just him. The younger boy, too. He started crying, real tears rolling down. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. We didn't know." Some part of me snapped. My voice came out flat dead. "Yes, you did. You both did." I don't know why I said that. Maybe I was looking for someone to blame, to push the knife a little deeper. I could see in his face he was devastated. But I was hurting too much to be gentle. I stood up, felt my back spasm. It didn't stop me. I clenched my fists, trying to keep from punching a hole in the wall. The rage, the betrayal, it was all too big. I glared at him, my own son who suddenly felt like a stranger. He tried to speak, but I barked. "Get out." My voice shook. "Just go," he begged. "Dad, please." I shook my head. "I'm not your dad." I spat, instantly hating myself for it but unable to stop. "Your father's the bastard who was on top of my wife. So go find him if you need a dad." He stared at me, tears streaming, then he grabbed his phone and ran out the door. I stood there shaking, staring at the spot where he'd been. A wave of regret hit me almost immediately. But I couldn't take back the words. Hours passed while I paced the house, knocking into furniture, feeling like a caged animal. My phone buzzed a dozen times, probably him, or my wife trying to reach me. I couldn't face any of it. I couldn't face the fact that I'd been living a lie for over a decade. That both boys, my boys, were actually Bill's. I kept hearing the older one's words, and I felt hollow. Like the floor fell out from under me. The next day, I didn't leave the house. I just sat there, blinds drawn, phone off. Food tasted like ash. Sleep eluded me. All I could think about was how Bill had been around all these years, how they might have been messing around even before the kids were born. The timeline scrambled my head. Every memory felt corrupted. Every happy moment twisted into a sick joke. After a few days, I forced myself to pack a bag. I didn't want to see them, didn't want to talk. I just wanted to vanish. So I grabbed clothes, a few personal items, some cash from the jar in the kitchen, and walked out the door. I left the lights off, locked up, got in my truck, and drove. No plan, no map. Just the road. I ended up a couple hours away, down near some backwoods area. Found a trailer park that rented monthly. It was rundown, with rusted trailers and a few shady-looking characters milling around. Perfect. I paid the first month in cash, got the keys to a little aluminum box that smelled like mildew. But it had a bed, a kitchenette, and it was far from home. I sank onto the mattress, stared at the peeling wallpaper. Safe from the world, or so I thought. Life in that trailer was as close to nothing as I could manage. I spent my days sitting on a lawn chair outside, chain-smoking despite having quit years ago. The pain in my back flared now and then, but I ignored it. I'd watch the sun move across the sky, listen to the wind rustle the pines. I rarely saw the neighbors. If I did, I just gave a curt nod. Didn't want to talk. Life in that trailer was as close to nothing as I could manage. I spent my days sitting on a lawn chair outside, chain-smoking despite having quit years ago. The pain in my back flared now and then, but I ignored it. I'd watch the sun move across the sky, listen to the wind rustle the pines. I rarely saw the neighbors. If I did, I just gave a curt nod. Didn't want to talk. At night, I'd sit at the rickety table, flip through an old album of photos I'd brought with me. Family pictures, kids' birthdays, vacations I thought were ours. All lies, or so it felt. I'd stare at the faces, linger on the kids' smiles, and feel this deep emptiness creep in. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of Bill in their features, maybe the shape of a brow or the angle of a smile. My stomach would twist, and I'd slam the album shut. After a while, the anger started bubbling up again. Sitting in that trailer, day after day, gave me too much time to stew in my own poison. I kept imagining Bill living his life, not paying for what he'd done. My wife, ex-wife, in my mind, maybe she was at her mom's. Or maybe Bill had slithered his way back into her bed. The kids, well, they'd likely cut me off by now, or they were too confused to reach out. I felt powerless. Forgotten. The quiet was eating me alive. One evening, I bought a cheap notebook and started scribbling. At first, it was just random thoughts, curses, things I wished I'd said. But then something sparked. I realized I knew a lot about them, their routines, their secrets, places they worked or studied. Bill's new job, my wife's boss, the kids' school. I had knowledge. And knowledge can hurt. So I started drafting letters. Not tearful confessions. Not pleas for them to come back. These were letters meant to sow fear. Threatening. Ugly. But not in a cartoonish way. I made them personal, detailed, referencing little pieces of their lives only I would know. I wanted them scared, unsettled. I wanted them to feel a fraction of what I felt. It was twisted, but in that broken state, it gave me purpose. I wrote to Bill's buddies, the guys he hung out with on weekends, told them vile things about him, included hints that he was sleeping with other wives. I didn't sign my name. I wrote to my wife's employer, accusing her of stealing petty cash, detailing how she'd lied about her background. Again, anonymously. I sent notes to the kids' school, suggesting misconduct, hinting at abuse at home. I never made direct threats, didn't want cops tracing it back easily. But I made sure there was enough detail to raise eyebrows. Every letter was typed on an old typewriter I found at a pawn shop, so no handwriting matched. I mailed them from random post offices, sometimes hours apart, always wearing a cap pulled low. The satisfaction I got was dark, but it dulled the pain. I was shredding their reputations bit by bit, ripping apart their sense of security. No blood, no direct violence. Just fear and chaos. The kids, though, I hesitated before sending the letters to the school. Part of me knew they were innocent, that they hadn't asked for any of this. But another part remembered how they just left with her that day, how they never questioned me, never even tried to stay. I felt betrayed by them too, so I included them in my sick plan. Regret tugged at me, but anger won out. Weeks passed. I heard rumors from a mutual friend that Bill lost his job because of these anonymous tips. My wife got suspended while they investigated the claim of theft. The kids started having trouble at school, teachers keeping a close eye on them, hinting that something was off at home. Good. Let them squirm. In that trailer, I was alone with my revenge fantasies, fueling them day by day. I told myself it was justice. They'd broken me. I was just returning the favor. I felt no rush to stop. If anything, it became my routine: wake up, smoke, write letters, mail them, come home, sleep. Over and over. Numb but focused. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see their photos online. Social media, you know. People post pictures of everything. I'd see an image of the younger boy at a school event, wearing a forced smile. Or a group photo where my wife stood in the background, looking tired. I'd stare at those pictures until my eyes burned. I could see the strain on their faces, the confusion. Maybe they suspected it was me sending those letters, but they had no proof. They couldn't stop it. On rare occasions, guilt crept in. I'd wonder if I was becoming worse than Bill. But then I'd remember that moment in my own bedroom, or the realization that the kids weren't mine, and the fury flared up again. Compassion? That died the day I threw the fish on the bed. One day, while I was at the post office about an hour away, I spotted a father and son walking in, the dad holding a little boy's hand. The kid looked up at him with big, trusting eyes. My stomach tightened. I thought about the years I spent believing I was a father, shaping my life around that identity. And it was all a lie. I left the post office feeling like I might punch someone, but I didn't. I just drove back to my trailer, locked the door, and sat alone in the dark. The nights got colder. The trailer's heater barely worked, so I'd wrap myself in blankets. Sometimes my mind drifted to thoughts of what life could have been, me being a grandpa someday, teaching the kids to fish. But that was gone. Even if the boys did have children, they'd be Bill's grandchildren, not mine. The thought twisted the knife deeper. In time, the money I'd saved started running low. I wasn't working, too angry and messed up to hold a job. My back pain was constant, and I'd pop over-the-counter pills like candy. I'd zone out, replaying the betrayal, fueling my hatred. Once in a while, I'd pass out drunk, wake up on the floor with a throbbing headache. A few months into this routine, I got a text on my phone from an unknown number. "Dad, please stop this. We know it's you. It's hurting all of us. Mom's losing her job. People are scared. Please." I stared at that message for a long time. I could feel a tear threaten, but I swallowed it back. I typed a single word. "No." Hit send. Then I turned off the phone again. Another week or two rolled by. I kept mailing letters, sometimes tampering with the addresses so they'd arrive slowly, unpredictably. I'd plant small rumors. Bill's got a drug problem, my wife is an embezzler, the kids vandalize property. Nothing outright insane, but enough to make folks uneasy. And I had details, dates, places, little inside information that gave these lies a ring of truth. One night, I dreamed I was back in my house, the kids running around, my wife in the kitchen, Bill nowhere in sight. Everything was normal. I was grilling steaks in the backyard, a cold beer in my hand, the radio playing. We laughed, talked about college plans for the boys, joked about me retiring. I woke up from that dream in a cold sweat. I felt like I'd lost my mind. The reality was so far from that dream it hurt. I staggered to the tiny bathroom, splashed water on my face, stared at the mirror. My reflection startled me. I looked older, my eyes sunken, cheeks hollow. A man consumed by bitterness. Part of me hated what I'd become, but I didn't see a way back. The lie they lived had undone me, and I couldn't forgive. Couldn't move on. Sabotaging them was all I had. Then came the day I mailed a letter to Bill's new landlord, claiming he was a sex offender. I included fake documents, doctored up from some template online. That was a step further than usual. I remember a tremor going through my hand as I sealed that envelope. Even by my standards, this was extreme. But I did it anyway. I walked out of the post office feeling like I'd crossed a line. Yet I kept walking. When I got back to the trailer, I saw the mailbox had something inside. A small envelope with my name on it. No return address. I opened it and found a single piece of paper with 2 words. Stop now. That was it. No signature, no detail. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. Maybe Bill had hired someone to track me. Or maybe the kids had found me. Either way, it rattled me. I looked around, half expecting someone to leap out of the bushes. Nothing. Just the wind. I went inside, locked the door, and sat at the table, staring at that note. My heart pounded. Fear mixed with a sick thrill. They knew. But if they wanted me to stop, they'd have to do more than send a note. Let them come. I had nothing to lose. Months dragged on. My revenge campaign kept going, letter after letter, rumor after rumor. I heard through the grapevine, an old buddy who texted me now and then, that Bill lost another job, that he was living off scraps. My wife, ex-wife, was barely hanging on to her position, going through some disciplinary process at work. The kids were outcasts at school, teased and whispered about. I had done that. And I didn't stop. Didn't want to stop. But then came the day my truck broke down. I was driving back from a post office run when the engine died, forcing me to pull over on a lonely highway. I sat there, cursing, hitting the steering wheel, my back throbbing. Finally, I called a tow truck, got hauled back to the trailer. The mechanic said it'd cost more than I had to fix it. So I was stranded. Stuck in that trailer park with no real income, living off the last bits of savings. The walls felt like they were closing in. I spent my days on foot after that, walking to the nearest store for groceries, avoiding people's eyes. My back hurt worse with every step, but I'd grit my teeth and push forward. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling, question if this was all worth it. My life was a wreck. Theirs was too, but at least they had each other. I had no one. One afternoon, while limping back from the store, I passed by a small playground. I noticed a grandfather pushing a little boy on a swing. The kid giggled, arms spread wide, trusting the old man to catch him. That scene damn near broke me. I thought of my boys, well, her and Bill's boys, and realized I'd never have that. If they had children one day, it wouldn't be my grandkids. I felt tears sting my eyes. I hurried away, not wanting anyone to see me break down. That night I sat with my typewriter, a blank page in front of me. I wanted to write another letter, but my hands wouldn't move. I just stared at the paper, feeling the weight of what I'd done. I'd torn their lives apart, and mine. Suddenly, I wasn't sure I had anything left to say. All my anger, all my spite, it was like a hot coal that had burned itself out. What was I left with? Ashes. I wandered to the bathroom, looked in the mirror again. Same haunted face, same bitterness etched in the lines around my mouth. I remembered how, years ago, I'd stand in front of a mirror and see a decent man. A father, a husband, a worker, someone who tried to do right. Now I saw a shell. I didn't blame anyone but myself for who I'd become. The betrayal was theirs, sure, but my choices after were my own. Sometime around midnight, I found myself scrolling through social media on my phone, even though I'd sworn I wouldn't. I pulled up their profiles, my ex-wife, Bill, the kids. Bill had posted something about losing vision in one eye, about needing medical help. My wife posted about feeling desperate, alone, about not knowing how to fix things. The older boy posted a photo of him and his brother at a park, both looking miserable. I stared at that picture a long time. They'd grown taller, their faces more drawn. And I felt this aching sadness. I realized I did love them, despite everything. For 10 years I was their dad. I taught them life lessons, patched their wounds, cheered them on. No DNA test could erase that. And yet, here I was, systematically destroying their lives because I couldn't handle the pain. I closed the app, heart pounding, tears burning the corners of my eyes. I told myself it was too late. I'd gone too far. There was no undoing the damage, no making amends. Even if I tried, they'd never forgive me. My mind was a storm of regret and bitterness, swirling so fast I could hardly breathe. Eventually, I shut off the lights and lay down, staring at the ceiling. Memories came flooding, the day the younger boy was born, how I thought he had my nose. The time Bill and I went fishing and he joked, "If you ever croak, I'll step in and help raise your kids, buddy." We'd laughed. Now that memory made me sick. I tossed and turned, but sleep wouldn't come. Morning light crept in through the dusty windows. I sat up, feeling older than my 50-plus years. My back was stiff, and I had a headache pounding behind my eyes. I decided to take a walk, stretch my legs, clear my mind. Heading outside, I noticed how quiet it was. The trailer park was mostly empty, a few old trucks rusting in driveways. An old man in a wheelchair eyed me from across the way, but he didn't speak. I walked until I reached a small diner on the edge of town. Ordered a coffee, black, and slid into a booth. I stared at the Formica table, feeling the cheap vinyl seat under me. I sipped the coffee, letting the warmth spread in my chest. A couple sat across from me, laughing softly, holding hands. I looked away, a twist of jealousy in my gut. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I ignored it. The coffee tasted bitter, but I kept drinking. I thought about what came next. I had no plan, no future I cared about. Just a trailer, a broken truck, and a pile of letters I'd already sent. I paid the bill, left a small tip, and walked back. That evening, I sat in front of the trailer, watching the sun set behind the pines. Sky turned orange, then red, then purple. It was beautiful, and I hated that I was seeing it alone. I thought of my kids again, wondered if they were safe, if they hated me now. Wondered if they'd have kids of their own one day, if they'd remember me at all. I realized I could never take back the sabotage. The threats. The fear. It was done. They'd carry those scars forever, and so would I. A part of me wanted to pick up the phone, call them, try to explain. But the words stuck in my throat. What would I say? "I'm sorry I ruined your life." It wouldn't fix anything. So I just sat there in the fading light, letting the days slip away. By the time the sun was gone, I felt a weight settle on me. This was my life now, alone, haunted, powerless to change the past. Maybe I deserved it. Weeks turned into months, and I stayed in that trailer. The letters slowed down, then stopped altogether. I'd done enough damage. When I got bored, I'd scroll through their profiles, see the kids struggling but moving on, see Bill with an eye patch, see my wife looking older and sadder. Sometimes I felt a spark of satisfaction. But mostly, it was emptiness. Now I live here in this nowhere town. Haven't seen my wife, ex-wife, in person since that day in her mother's kitchen. Haven't spoken to Bill since I smashed his head in. The kids I see only online. They're taller now, voices deeper. They might go to college soon. Part of me wonders if I should at least try to say sorry. But I don't. The anger hasn't fully left me, and the guilt is too heavy. Sometimes I imagine a different world, where I found out about the affair without seeing them in the act. Maybe I'd have handled it differently, maybe I wouldn't have lost my mind. But that's not what happened. What happened was real, and I'm left with this. I see pictures of the boys, these strangers who carry my cousin's blood, and I think, I was a good dad in my own way. But that doesn't matter now. They're not mine. They never were. And I have to live with that. Late at night, I sit by the trailer window, looking at the moon, thinking of them out there, growing up. I wonder if they'll ever try to find me someday, maybe ask me about how it all went wrong. I don't know what I'd say. Probably nothing. I've run out of words. This is my life, a quiet trailer, a broken truck, and a memory that plays on repeat. Sometimes I laugh at how pathetic it all is. Sometimes I feel tears coming, but I choke them back. A 50-something man, alone with a busted back and a busted heart. That's it. That's the story. No grand redemption, no final showdown. Just me, here, breathing, carrying the weight of what I did and what they did. It's not pretty, it's not nice, but it's true. And I guess that's all there is to say.